Great. Okay. Welcome everyone to today's webinar on connecting the dots, environmental physiotherapy and service learning. So really happy to see you all here. We're meeting on the back of the publication of a series of articles of ultimately the first ever special issue featuring environmental physiotherapy, in particular in the journal Frontiers in Public Health. This is the home of the special issue. It by now has a total of 10 articles published, including the editorial, on all sorts of topics touching on environmental physiotherapy and related issues. This was a collaboration between the Environmental Physiotherapy Association and the Innovation Unit in Sustainable Development, Health and Global Justice through Service Learning at the University of the Balearic Islands, which is a unit that Berta Paz Lourido leads, that's here with us today, and she will be our last speaker in a moment. It's been a really great experience. It's been lovely, ultimately to continue seeing environmental physiotherapy grow and also grow in this particular way of having its first ever special issue. It's a really meaningful moment for us. We've had a first webinar with some speakers from some of the publications a few months ago. I want to say it was in May, maybe. Some of those speakers also are here, of course, Emma being one of them. But we wanted to, have another one and give some of the other people that published articles in the special issue also a chance to present on their work. And that's what we're coming to today. I'll leave kind of personal introductions to each of the speakers, but we'll be hearing from Steinnun Olafsdottir from the University of Iceland, followed by Richard Doran-Sherlock, who is an osteopath from Ireland, and then Annie Palstam from Gothenburg University, and ultimately in the end Berta Paz Lourido. The presentations will last for about 10 minutes each. And I think what we'll do this time around is we'll just open a bit of space right after each presentation for some direct question to the respective speaker or presenter. And then in addition to that, also at the end, we can come back to questions again after everyone's presented. I'll try to keep us to a good time. We've scheduled to go until what is in my time zone, 7:15 in the evening. So we have a little over an hour to go. Yes, for those listening in or viewing in, for the sake of community, you're very welcome to turn on your cameras at any point in time, so long as you're not doing funny business on the other side of your camera. But we'd love to see you and have that sense of community. Please keep your microphones on mute until sort of the question and answer section. If you, for some reason, can't use your microphone, but you do have burning questions, feel free to type them into the chat, and I will find ways to relay them if I manage to stay on top of everything at the same time. Okay, so as I said, personal introductions, pleased to be delivered by the speakers. And I don't know if the speakers have presentations, but I think the sharing should be free for everyone. So if you do have some presentations, feel free to share now. Steinnun, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Filip. Share. And maybe, where is this button here? How does this look?
Fantastic.
Great. Hi, nice to see you all. My name is Steinnun, and I, as Filip said, is at the Department of Physiotherapy at the University of Iceland. We have one physiotherapy program in Iceland, so I'm actually the one who has been spreading out environmental physiotherapy at our university, or at least trying. I'm going to tell you about this paper or research that was published in the Frontier of Public Health. Is that right? And it was a survey that we did on among physiotherapists in Iceland. It was a master's project that Lilja Salome Pétursdóttir worked under my supervision like 1.5 years ago. And she was among the, I think she was among the first, in the first class that actually, after that I got to know Filip and we got into some environmental discussion and kind of ignited her interest in doing this doing this research. So it's actually the first one that has been done among physios in Iceland. So where is this thing here? I guess we know there's that who has claimed that the climate change is the greatest health threat, and we know that 5% of the global environmental impact actually comes from the healthcare and healthcare-related industry. At the same time, we also, I guess all of us, or most of us know that physiotherapy doesn't have the biggest environmental impact, since we are emphasizing movement, touch, and communication as our main tools in our treatments. Having said that, we actually were not, like me and Lilja, my master students, were discussing that we do not know what the physiotherapists in Iceland think about this. Do they actually ever think about how physiotherapy, how that is impacting or not impacting the climate change, and how we can work more in having a role in reducing and maybe reducing the need of many more health surgeries and so forth that actually have much more environmental impact than physiotherapy. So we started out with these 4 research questions. We wanted to explore their knowledge and their knowledge on the climate change and how it relates to health, both in Iceland and globally. Also what they think about their role and how they kind of relate it to their jobs as physiotherapists. How is their eco-friendly practices at work, and what are the barriers and facilitators that are actually supporting or not eco-friendly practices at their workplace. So what we developed this survey that we sent, and it is actually supplemental material with the article, but we did develop this survey and adapted it from other existing literature. There has been some surveys done in the US and South Africa and maybe some other places. So these are 17 questions that we made with some additional ones, like open questions. And we emailed to all members of the Icelandic Physiotherapy Association, which were at that time 666. And we got a little over 17% response rate. It's not too high, but still it's something. So the participants, why is this not working here? The majority of the participants were women, which is not really reflecting the demography of physios in Iceland. It's more like 60 to 70% female, 30 to 40% male. But the other, like the age distribution and the workplace setting, is relatively reflecting the demography in Iceland. And yes, okay. Most participants, they assessed the knowledge as intermediate. They were kind of modest with assessing their knowledge, but we can still see that almost 40% said that it was advanced or rather advanced. And nobody said that it was rather little or they had no knowledge. So I guess we do have, or physios in Iceland, they have some knowledge on climate change and its relation to health. So when we asked about if they believed that it is having effect on people in Iceland, 84% reported yes, but 97% globally. So majority can see yes, the climate change is affecting health, but more abroad than in our little island. Most people, when there was like an open question if they could give an example on how they believed climate change was affecting people's health, and most people mentioned like respiratory diseases with the increased air pollutions. Also, physios mentioned the consequences of the climate change, so with the excess heat and the weather conditions and how it was affecting like the food supply and water. Mental health was also mentioned, both like people that already have been in some kind of disaster, but also like the younger generation. As we know, research has shown that younger generations seem to be have some climate-related anxiety. The outdoor physical activity was mentioned, that people actually would go less often outside if there was more extreme weather or participation due to climate changes, and that could, of course, affect negatively both mental and physical health. And this was actually one of the themes that was kind of unique for the physio research, that when we were looking into the surveys where like health care professionals had been asked. This was like a physio thing to mention, that's a physical activity thing. And then there were, of course, some other infections and other diseases mentioned. With the statements that we had on their attitudes and roles, physios, they agreed or strongly agreed with most of the statements. Like that we need to limit environmental impact both on of the healthcare in whole, but also in physiotherapy. There's high interest there in learning more, and with that physios, they also see their role in like influencing change and raising awareness both of the public and their own clients. But this is still the statements that had the most neither or nor responses. So maybe these were the statements that, yeah, maybe more confusion on how we can add something there. And when in an open question, we asked the physios how they can impact climate change, and there were 4 themes that were identified from their answers. That was with the active transportation and physical activity, and emphasizing that we should be a role model for using active transportation, and thereby encouraging our clients, and then also using physical activity as a treatment. We could also like reduce or avoiding using disposable products and other resources, waste sorting, and then there is this education that is actually repeatedly coming, that we can educate our clients on eco-friendly lifestyles. Now I see this is kind of a repetition of the other one, so I think since I see 9 minutes on my screen that I'm going to go over here. We asked about if their workplaces had environmental policy, and we were kind of surprised that people actually, over 20% did actually not know if their workplace had an environmental policy, while just over half said yes. So yeah, we thought it was interesting. Another interesting thing was that many act like they are trying to be eco-friendly at their workplace, but much more of like a 95% are trying to do something in their own homes. So they do more in their personal life than they actually are doing in their work. So when we were asking about barriers and motivators, how we could implement more eco-friendly workplaces for physiotherapists, they said that the main barrier was the lack of knowledge and some resource barriers. They actually did not quite know what to do. And facilitators would include like guidelines, education, and some workplace policies. And it is really emphasized that there is a need for like a professional support within their workplace, clinics or organization level. So physiotherapists, they are aware, but they need actually more practical tools to use. There is a gap between personal and professional actions, and there is this emphasized opportunity for training and guidelines. A big call for guidelines, education and policy, and we need more research. And actually this one was thought as being kind of a base for further research. We have planned on doing some focus groups among physios, hopefully soon. So thank you, Filip. No, thank you all of us, and thank you. Over to you, Filip.
Thanks, Steinnun. Lovely. Thank you so much for the presentation. I think, yeah, perfect if you stop sharing there. So this is a first opportunity. Lots of claps there. That's great.
Thank you.
First opportunity for questions, if there are any. I can maybe just get us started with one while people make up their minds. Yes, Emma, I'll come right back to you. I think for me, Steinnun, you kind of touched on this a little bit. You're planning some kind of focus group study. But for me, so in some ways, I'm curious what you want to do there in the focus group and why that. But ultimately, my question is, with this kind of study, not even specific to you, what do we do once we have this knowledge? Like, what are the next steps to be taken? Is it just research, or are there other steps to be taken? And what would you say? What are they like? Yeah.
I think if I take the second question, that I think it is telling us that the physios out there, they need something in their hands, and as you know, we have been promoting the posters, so just to give some material in their hand. I also think that we could promote like the resources that we have on the EPA page. There is a lot of stuff there that we could. So I think that's kind of something that at least we took that message to us, that to make some material that they can use at work. With the other question with the focus groups, we were actually thinking about like deepening the understanding on how we can support them. What is it exactly that they would like to have, or is it something that we that we are overseeing? I think just having this conversation with the physios, and also I think we could do that. If we could do that, it would also how could I say that, like spread out the word. So there is something ongoing, and maybe just lightning bulbs in the
Lovely. Yeah, thank you. Emma, your question, and then Steinnun with another minute for the answer.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation, Steinnun. Very nice. I was thinking, did you in any way look at kind of if they had some kind of norms or specifically some kind of values or attitudes among their co-workers? I mean, if it could be something that they have a strong professional identity that they don't really want to kind of change by doing something more environmental friendly, because I think there are some research showing that some health professionals have more strong professional identities have a harder time transferring the eco-friendly behaviors from their personal lives into their professional lives. So I was wondering if you had any questions regarding, I don't know, work culture.
No, we actually, the only question that we did ask was about this, if there was like an environmental policy within their workplace. On the other hand, we sometimes, well, it's not a joke, but we still joke about it at our department, that, we are giving the students not only with the environmental physiotherapy, but with all of those things that they are learning. But then we know if they don't kind of pick it up in their first 1 or 2 years of career, it kind of all goes down again. So I think maybe with the younger physios, I know of one clinic that there are like it's a new clinic. So if you get some new clinic with younger physios working together, I think actually there is some potential there, but I'm not there yet.
Yeah, thank you.
Lovely. Thank you
for the question.
Okay, so we'll aim to have a bit more time for questions also at the end, as I said, but for now, we'll give the word to Richard Doran-Sherlock. Richard, over to you.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, just checking that everyone can see that.
Yeah, yes. At the moment we're seeing your whole present sort of PowerPoint view.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah, there we are.
So just thank you everyone so much for listening and for giving me your time. I'm going to be discussing a paper that we published as part of this, the Frontiers project, in relation to nature therapy. I'm an osteopath based in Ireland. I've also worked with environmental and conservation groups to develop nature-based health initiatives and nature therapy sessions. And I also occasionally run community-based nature therapy sessions myself. So this is an area I'm deeply invested in and wanted to write something which would help explore and communicate some of the complexities that are involved in a way where people would be able to have some frameworks, have some guidelines when they're developing nature programs that are unique to their own ecological, political, and social contexts. And to do this, I'm going to ask for help from various birds in Ireland. All of the birds that will feature in this presentation have specific roles in Irish myth and Irish history. And as such, this will function as a little nature therapy session, which I'd like to share with you all. So the very first bird we have here is the goldcrest, the smallest bird in Ireland. It's a beautiful bird. It moves really fast. Getting a photograph of it is like capturing lightning in a bottle. And when you're engaging with nature therapies, you're engaging with other species like this. And when you see the photograph on the right-hand side, the bird feeding its chicks, that photograph had to be taken under license. It is in Ireland illegal to take a photograph of a bird on a nest. And while if people are not quite aware of that, that can seem like quite a shocking statement, a shocking law. But there's good reason for it. One is by taking a photograph, you're likely to disturb the bird. The bird might spend less time in the nest. The chicks might get colder. They might not get fed as much, and it might impact their ability to survive. There's another nuance here, which I think is really important and helps me which is this: the hooded crow. It's an incredibly smart and capable omnivore. But what people often don't realize when they're taking photographs is that somewhere in a tree, looking at what they're taking a picture of. And as such, when we are stepping into a natural space with non-human entities and natural processes, we are interacting with systems and interactions and dynamism and interrelationships, some of which we know and some of which we might never. And this is also true for the social and political context in which we engage with nature. There's a lot to consider, and it is quite challenging. And as such, we wrote this paper as a way to hopefully start a conversation where people who are looking to develop nature-based interventions, and that's everything from forest bathing to bird therapy to wilderness exploration to therapeutic horticulture, would have just some anchor points to help deal and manage with these complexities. I'm not going to go into too much of the background theory with regards to nature therapy. I think most people would be vaguely aware, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions afterwards. There are challenges in the primary research when it comes to implementing nature therapy. There's the usual thing that we all encounter in the musculoskeletal field, where we have small studies that aren't particularly statistically robust, have percolated out into culture. So for instance, while there are now starting to be studies on clinical populations, some of the benefits of nature therapy with respect to mental health issues were conducted on asymptomatic populations. And if you get a transient reduction in a depressive score in someone's mood, that could be statistically significant. But to extrapolate that to be significant for a clinical diagnosis of depression is quite a significant leap. And in dealing with some environmental groups, I did notice that leap was being made. So it's really, really important that we're not overstating the case on a health ground. That the nature-based therapies can be incredibly powerful and incredibly meaningful, but we also have to be grounded in what we can demonstrate. There are challenges in implementation of nature therapies. And this is an incredibly broad area insofar as spatial and political subtleties really come to play here. When it comes to accessing spaces where non-human entities or natural processes thrive, that can be very influenced by the politics of land ownership. In some countries, we have such as my own, there's a high degree of privatized land ownership, and the ability of people to access wider spaces is extremely limited. Whereas other countries, like Sweden is one, there's a much greater ability to move through a landscape and to incorporate, to encounter different processes, different entities. And it's really important that when we're developing nature therapy interventions, that's something that's considered. Some people have suggested that engaging with nature, because there are certainly demonstrable health benefits, not always totally unambiguous, but it could be something that's used to help address health inequalities. But if we have nature therapy and inequality of access, that's something which is likely to perpetuate it. So transport inequality and access inequality are deeply entwined. And when we're considering transport inequality, we also have to consider the environmental impact of the transport itself. Another subtlety that is extremely important to take into account in various regions of the world is eco-colonialism. We've seen how ecotourism can be used as a kind of fortress conservation model and excluding indigenous people from the land. And it's really, really important that the lessons from that field are learned and integrated into nature therapies, especially in areas where indigenous people have been historically or are currently being displaced from the land. So that leads us to hopefully a line of new direction for this whole field. And something that I think we tried to articulate is the fact that even in the absence of quantifiable dose response measures of health benefit, some of the benefit we develop as humans from engaging with natural spaces, natural processes, has to do with meaning, which is an incredibly nebulous but powerful concept. And I think that defending it as an intrinsic value rather than framing it exclusively in biomedical terms is something that we should develop the confidence to do. And I say that as much as a point of reflection on my own. As we come back to the original example of the goldcrest and the crow, ecological disturbance is also something that we need to consider. That when we're interacting in these spaces, we are interacting whether we're cognizant of it or not. And becoming ecologically knowledgeable is so important for developing the programs that might potentially help people with suffering and improve their overall health. Anthropocentrism is potentially reflected in the absence of that when we are engaging with natural spaces, we can potentially see it as a passive utilitarian concept that we're just exploiting for our own utility. And it's important to consider how we can potentially interact with natural spaces in such a way that we are part of them rather than consuming them, and improving the overall capacity for those systems to live and thrive on their own accord. So this led to us developing 9 considerations. They're not meant to be exhaustive, and it's our sincere hope that these are things which people can take and adapt and mold and change and use to reflect their own individual, personal, societal, and ecological contexts. Aiming for locality makes a lot of sense in terms of if you're looking to build an active relationship with the outer world, with the natural world, that which you can interact with regularly is going to be something that you will develop a more robust sense of connection with and knowledge about, as well as reducing potential transport-related emissions and ecological costs. Consideration for the benefit and outcomes, and this comes to being honest about what we can say and what we can't say, what uncertainties we have about the health outcomes of engaging with natural spaces, natural processes. Taking into account the social and economic needs of people who we want to help and reach out to, that it is possible to both use nature therapies to break down health inequalities, but also to perpetuate them. Sharing multidisciplinary ecological knowledge is something that I think can be incredibly fruitful and also quite fun. Exploring and understanding a deeper relationship with ecological processes involves stepping outside of our field and speaking to ecologists, speaking to people who hold local indigenous and cultural knowledge. It involves a process of learning and making sure that we're continuously growing and admitting what we don't know, which is both humbling, but also that in itself is a large source of the wonder we have when you encounter a natural space. Access and activism relates to how we can potentially lobby, either collectively or in our communities, either individually as political activism, or potentially using our professional associations and groups to lobby for better access for people, especially those who are economically disadvantaged. Leave no trace refers to the idea that engaging with nature and engaging with natural spaces, we have a responsibility to the other entities in those spaces, and having an ethic which involves minimizing our impact on those environments is extremely important. So that should be embedded, ideally that would be embedded within the context of a nature therapy initiative. Number 7 refers to a key point to avoid perpetuating eco-colonialism, which is deferring to the wisdom, knowledge, and leadership of indigenous peoples in colonized regions where environmental initiatives or environmental therapy may be taking place. Pluralism refers to the fact that the frames we use to understand nature, whether they are religious or positivist, are deeply, deeply personal, and we should be open to the different perspectives that people bring. Oftentimes certain nature therapy programs can have a very set frame through which people are encouraged to look at the natural world, whereas I think that's ultimately a value decision, and opening it up to different values is something which can be very enriching for everyone who participates. And lastly, training and education. That people who work in musculoskeletal care, physiotherapists, osteopaths, occupational therapists, we have a really good perspective on movement, and engaging in movement in natural spaces is a very natural segue on top of our fundamental training. So potentially that's something that we could integrate at undergraduate or postgraduate level. So lastly, I just want to really thank my co-authors. I learned so much from working with you all, and thank you all so much for your time for listening to me.
Thanks, Richard. Setting the bar very high when it comes to how to structure our presentations here with the additional kind of burden ecological info. Thank you for that. I think you can stop sharing the PowerPoint, and then we have about a couple of minutes, maybe for one question, if there is one, an immediate one. Sure, Emma.
I always have questions. Thank you so much, Richard, for a beautiful presentation. I was wondering about this thing about including perhaps nature ethics and ecological knowledge into undergraduate education. Would it be an idea also to kind of reach out to the Planetary Health Report Card, a group of students that is evaluating universities? Because I don't really think there are any questions regarding like the nature ethics or ecological knowledge. I know they have a question about indigenous knowledge, but would it be an idea to kind of see if they could include, if the undergraduate programs have some kind of teaching or learning activities regarding this? What do you think? What's your opinion on that?
I don't have a sense of that being a bad idea at all. I think it's wonderful to reach out and share what we can. In that the intention of the paper is not necessarily, and my perspective is not from the perspective of having a full vision of how this will form, of how this will look in 3-5 years. What I'm hoping is that we light enough fires that people are asking these questions so that they can look around who is around them in terms of groups with knowledge we can share and discuss with. So yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, just to keep us on time, again, there will be time for more questions later on, but to keep us on time, I'm inclined to hand over the word again to Annie this time, Annie Palstam, and yeah, feel free to share or yeah.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank
Sorry,
you.
Berta, sorry, to Annie. You're one after.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
Filip.
Annie first, all good. Yeah. Yeah, there is the presentation.
Do you see it? And
we do, yeah.
And thank you, Richard, for I love birds, so it was very enjoyable to look at. This will not be as enjoyable. I'm sorry, I could not get rid of I had a presentation with some of these slides at a conference last year, and I just couldn't get rid of the details in the background. So it's there. Sorry for that. But now you can see the information is on them is correct. So. I'm Annie Palstam. I'm associate professor and physiotherapist at Sahlgrenska Academy, University of Gothenburg. And I'm also with the School of Health and Welfare at Dalarna University and an associate researcher at Center for Sustainable Healthcare. I also would like to mention my union association, or where I am the chair of the Council of Ethics and Sustainability, a council that I'm very proud that we have this combination in the Swedish Association of Physiotherapists. Okay, so I'm repeating some of the information here from the first presentation, that why should we act on climate change from a healthcare perspective? And well, climate change is the biggest health threat, and our other incentive from the healthcare perspective is that we are a large contributor of greenhouse gas emissions. You probably all know about the statistics on this. There's a wide range in the world of emissions from healthcare. These are some of the numbers. In Sweden, we are right in the global average. But what is even more interesting is what it comes from. And I would just like to share this. I think this is a really important information or important slide to share, that if we start looking at the right bar, we can see that in the red field is 10% of our emissions from healthcare, which comes actually from harmful care. And the 30%, which is the yellow part of the bar, it comes from low value care. And only 60%, the green part of the bar, comes from effective care. So actually, we could save a lot of greenhouse gas emissions if we stop doing harmful care and low value care. And oftentimes, it feels like environmental issues in healthcare is a concern for the environmental office at healthcare services, focusing on buildings, electricity, and so forth. But if we look at the pie chart to the left, we can see that the gray pie, or the piece of the pie, comes from buildings, electricity, and gas, and it's only 20% of the emissions, and 80% come from clinical care. So emissions from healthcare is all about decisions that are made in the clinics, clinical decision making. And we wrote a perspective paper in this Frontiers theme issue called Advancing Sustainable Healthcare Through Multidisciplinary Stroke Team Rehabilitation. It's a perspective paper. We aimed first to do some sort of review, but there is so little literature in this field, so it was hard to find articles. So we did a perspective paper, and we used the principles for sustainable healthcare as suggested by the Center for Sustainable Healthcare back in 2018 as a framework. to identify how multidisciplinary stroke team rehabilitation could contribute to sustainable healthcare. And this is the principles for sustainable healthcare. And sustainable healthcare is all about reducing carbon without reducing health outcomes. So from the left, the goal with sustainable healthcare is to reduce carbon without reducing health outcomes. And this can be done from the top to the one step to the right by reducing healthcare activities and by reducing carbon intensity from the activities. So then if we look to the left, the principles for sustainable healthcare, as suggested by Mortimer, are prevention. It's about tackling the biological and socioeconomic determinants of health to promote health and prevent illness. Healthcare is, after all, at its most sustainable level when it is not required. And then comes empowerment, to inspire and educate our communities to take control of their health, empower patients to take an active role in co-managing their health, improving their experiences and outcomes, and potentially reducing future healthcare demand. And then there's lean pathways, streamlining care, minimizing low-value activities, and removing unnecessary procedures. And when it comes to reducing carbon intensity, we have the principles of using low-carbon alternatives and also operational resource use, reduce, reuse, recycle. So what we did in our paper was to search for intervention studies of stroke team rehabilitation with outcomes of sustainability. And as anticipated, sustainability outcomes were not explicitly addressed in almost any studies. We found one. So therefore, we included studies with outcomes that we could interpret as values of sustainability, such as, for example, length of stay at hospital. And so this is a graphical illustration of what we found. And from the top left, we have the overall goal for rehabilitation, which is maximize functioning and health and minimize disability and need of care. And then in the middle gray area, we have the central aspects of team rehabilitation to sustainable stroke care, which we identified. And I will go through them, but I will take the bottom line first, where we have the principles of sustainable healthcare. So we have the three firsts that include reducing healthcare activity, and then we have the second two with reduced carbon intensity. So the four central aspects that we identified was the provision of timely and dose-specific interventions that optimize functioning. And interventions here could be early supported discharge from the hospital, having a supported rehabilitation team coming to the patient homes instead of staying longer in the hospital. And also we looked at arm and hand rehabilitation at the stroke unit. And there we found that this had the most connection to the prevention, empowerment, and lean pathways principles. And then we have the next aspect was a team rehabilitation support self-efficacy and empowerment, which goes over all five principles. And then we have telerehabilitation as a low resource delivery mode, which mostly goes for the two principles on reduced carbon intensity. And then we have the secondary prevention and health promotion that minimize need of care. And this one goes over all the five principles. So just to make an example, I don't have time to go through them all in detail, but stroke team rehabilitation provided at the right time and the right dose and to patients that benefit the most will optimize functioning and thereby, in addition, render important co-benefits for sustainable healthcare. However, empirical studies of evaluations are lacking. But one example is early supported discharge from the hospital, where the stroke team provides rehabilitation at the patient's home instead of at the hospital. And it involves saving resources resources, since hospital care produces a high carbon footprint. And it's also shown to be beneficial regarding the patient's daily activities early after stroke, which is in line with optimizing functioning. But when it comes to the importance of dose-specific rehabilitation, it has been found difficult to achieve the intervention dose needed to improve functioning, for example, in upper limb rehabilitation after stroke. And this actually implies that an insufficient dose of rehabilitation could be a waste of valuable resources. So it's unsustainable to provide too little of a rehabilitation intervention. So rather, an adequate rehabilitation dose is essential for achieving sustainable healthcare. But as I said, evaluations are lacking. So what we sort of conclude in this study is that we need to evaluate sustainability. And this could be done, for example, by using the triple bottom line equation, where not only including outcomes for patients and or populations, but also include environmental, social, and financial impacts. And I took the freedom to just say I know it's not much time left, but since then we have published actually an evaluation of these sustainability aspects from a study of very early supported discharge. So this was a randomized control study done a couple of years ago with this long-term follow-up where we added variables of sustainable development. So the aim here was to evaluate cost and environmental impact due to healthcare consumption during the first year after stroke in patients who were randomized to very early supported discharge compared with patients who were discharged from hospital according to ordinary routines. It was 140 patients in total. So we looked at social sustainability, where patients reported health-related quality of life after 1 year. We looked at economic sustainability as the cost of healthcare consumption in the both from the hospital, but also from all healthcare consumption during 1 year. And from the healthcare consumption data, we put on the estimates of carbon emissions from the UK database on carbon emissions from healthcare activities. And we found that the group with early supported discharge had a 2-day difference in hospital stays. So they were at the hospital 2 days less in mean. And there were no difference in healthcare use over time after that between the two groups. Both groups had pretty much the same health-related quality of life, so it was maintained for this group. But the early supported discharge saved healthcare resources and also reduced the environmental impact. So what I would like to suggest is that we need to now, we are in the decade of action. We're actually in the later part of the decade of action. So we need to start evaluating our interventions from a sustainability perspective. So to conclude, we should use a framework to identify sustainability in stroke care or all care, and identify the carbon hotspots and reduce the carbon footprint. And we need to evaluate the carbon impact in addition to health and economic outcomes of our interventions. And these are the links to both of these studies. Thank you. Sorry, I
Very nice.
broke the time.
No, thank you. Very nice, Annie. Thank you very much. It was great. Great to hear this activity, and also especially the follow-up activity as well, kind of just continuing the work. You can unshare your screen now, and then we can do a quick check-in if there is a question. We have time for one question and answer. If there is anything immediate from anyone, feel free.
Did I stop it?
Yeah,
good.
I have one question that I'm really curious about, if there is no hands coming up. You had this slide up quite early on in your presentation that had this bar about harmful care, low value care, and effective care. That's just immediately piques my interest about how are those defined, who defines what's harmful care, low value care, et cetera, right? Like, I mean, taking example for low value care, I don't know how it was defined or how it is defined exactly. But of course, what might seem low value from some perspective might be very high value for, I don't know, one particular patient or whatever. So what are the definitions there, and like what's maybe the challenges with these kinds of definitions?
Yeah, good point. I should look into that definition, I think, but I think whatever that definition is, I think what is a take-home message for me is that we really need to work with the best evidence-based practice and actually stop doing things that we have been doing for a very long time that may not be up to date, but that is just continuing. So we also, when new guidelines come, we need to adapt. And this is not, I'm just not talking about physiotherapy, but healthcare at large. We need to do the things that are the new evidence-based interventions, and equally important, stop doing the other things.
Thank you. Lovely. Okay, that brings us to our last presentation for today. And it's by Berta Paz Lourido, who has also been the kind of lead editor for this special issue and has contributed an article of her own in addition to an editorial. Berta, over to you.
Hi, good afternoon. How are you doing? I'm so pleased to be here and see you. So many familiar faces. I'm not going to make a presentation, so then we can relax and start enjoying this community sense that I think is so beautiful to be so many friends, colleagues, and people involved in this topic and interested in this research issue. My article, not mine, I mean, it's a shared article, and I'm happy that Alvaro agreed to participate and contribute to this discussion. It's about regenerating physiotherapy curriculum in higher education, diving into planetary health and service learning conceptual synergies. I have to say that in the very beginning, we thought about presenting a case and then discuss from that. But then, and I can explain more later, we thought that it was needed to put on the table some of the rationales that we were using before talking about a case study about some strategies that we are using at the university. So the idea behind this article was to discuss, and I hope that this meeting is also a process not to explain the article, but to share it with you and also bring in new ideas, because I don't know how it's in your case. In my case, I usually don't read my articles once they're published. I try to wait a little bit. Either I'm very critical with that and I would like to change so many things. So this is scaring, Filip. But yeah, we are a little bit more friendly with ourselves after a few years. So the idea was discussing a bit why we want to work on the curriculum, because sometimes we put a lot of pressure or a lot of recommendations for professionals, but then many times it's difficult to make a kind of real change of the curriculum. We add activities, we add courses, we try to make a smooth transition, but sometimes this takes too long. And then we wanted to present a way of working on this regeneration through service learning as a way of using a pedagogy that itself is related to communication, reciprocity, and connection with the community. So in fact, what is behind all this is also the sense that even when professionals and our students, they want recipes, they want guidelines, and we can provide that, and we are in the position to do so, we also need to work with them live, the sense of connectiveness, uncertainty, complexity, and that brings into a new space where things are not black and white, and then we are navigating a lot of gray. So here is why we start talking about planetary health, and then planetary health is so many things depending on who is writing about planetary health. So bringing some of this research of that. Then talking also about physiotherapy, and I know that many people that they are in the field of physiotherapy, maybe they feel that they are not so well understood, or they don't feel their support when they are trying to talk about policy making, something that is environmental or community engaged. So I mean, the article also have this role like, okay, it's fine, we are doing, what we can, but it's also sometimes not only working on the cases and the activities, but also to promote another way of doing, to also bring to our students and colleagues this kind of open discussion about what can we do and who are going to be the contributors to that. So at the end, when we read about that, the article is also a lot of this peripheric epistemology is included. So it is not that the academia decides what is good for the curriculum, how we want to plan it, all the quality assurance processes. It also a share process in which, through service learning, this approach in which students learn through co-creation with the community in very specific topics, this is a possibility to permeate the curriculum. That brings to the issue that the fact that the students of physiotherapy are working together with organizations for the community, it doesn't mean that it has to be patients associations or there has to be professional association. It can be entities related to a lot of different organizations and different topics. It can be environmental, it can be culture, it can be social inclusion. So this is the way that is described in the article, how one of the possibilities, since it is sometimes so difficult to navigate these transformations in the curriculum, one of the possibilities is to work with the active and experiential pedagogies. So it might be a starting point. It might be also a position where students and professionals, they experience another way of being taught physiotherapy, to get insight from groups outside of the academia, and that can also help in this in discussion about what is the role of physiotherapists in the current climate challenges. So in the discussion, we also use the Global Action Plan on Climate Change and Health as online for discussions, just to show that it can be a framework. It is also some governance documents and policy documents that can be used. But at the very end, it is this open space for creating this new curriculum based also in the context. And that is very important. We all have these national regulations and we have all these professional recommendations, but also there are some context relevant issues that sometimes we don't find a way to include that properly or in a way that has a fast effect. So the article raises these issues. I'm very pleased to have the possibility to talk about it, but also very interested in listening to you either today or in any other moment if you think that this is something that can be discussed and go on this process. I mean, this is very much putting together some rationales and trying to find this synergic way. But the idea is to go on showing showcases about how we are doing that, the enablers, but also the barriers. I am very happy of having this Zoom today. If I could do this last week, I don't know, I was so pessimistic about university and higher education and so on, that today is fine. But it is a very tough environment, and it's important for us that we find supporters in the academia with our colleagues, but also in our students and outside the academia. And outside the academia means community, and community see us many times and see that we can do a lot of more things that sometimes things than we think. So thank you. It is 7. We still have 15 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you,
Thank you.
Berta. Thank you for that lovely talk also. That was really good. So we have time for questions now. Maybe just see if there's something specific to Berta right away. While people might raise their hands or come up with their questions, I do have one of my own, Berta, that it's something that, it's just kind of like, I'd love for you to comment on. It's this thought that I have, and I've mentioned this to you several times before. I think one of the issues with this, okay, so environmental physiotherapy idea is that, okay, it sounds lovely, right? But initially we don't know what it means. So we kind of have to explore, so what does the environment have to do with physiotherapy? So we find out, okay, we have an environmental footprint, there's these connections and those connections, and there's different ways that environment and physiotherapy connect. And what do we do, right? Like, so I think any kind of touched a little bit on some of the things that we can do is we can, change our practices to reduce environmental footprint, those kinds of things. But I'm always inclined to think that actually the more we realize what the connections are between the environment and physiotherapy, this is going to imply that we need to think of totally new kinds of practices. And so I'm not like as deeply steeped in service learning as you are. And I think, sorry, a little detour. Richard also mentioned some different kinds of practices, of course, in this kind of nature-based interventions and some ecosystem restoration and those kinds of things. But I'm really interested in. I feel like service learning and kind of using service learning more actively in physiotherapy or kind of healthcare education might be a really good road for us to develop, invent, and kind of innovate practice so as to be much more sort of like novel types of planetary health, sustainable healthcare, environmental physiotherapy practice. Do you see it that way? And how do you see that can come about?
Yeah, thank you for your question. What I like the most of working with service learning and this kind of pedagogies, it is the fact that you know where you start, but there is a kind of process that depends on the organization that you're working with. It depends on how the students build on based on the previous experiences. So, and also important thing is the issue that we are not talking about, for example, community campus partnerships where students are concentrated in gaining some practical or specific competences to work on a particular area. It is a kind of attitude and responsibility, and there is a values-driven pedagogy. So that is so important, in fact, because there is the way of telling you, okay, you are sensitive to the world, you can be exposed. It is not everything easy. It is not like having a PowerPoint where they say, oh, families sometimes they suffer for this. I mean, you're going to be in touch with that, and you are going to see, and you're going to, for example, be working with a group of migrants that they are in your city because they left their country, and why. And so you listen to that from their own voices, and then it's a way of building another kind of not professional but person that we hope that gets more involved. Of course, then we have a lot of cases that we have to be very careful in the way that how we established this kind of relationships and the reciprocity and balanced process that we do. But I think it's a good way. It is a good way. And I would say it's an enthusiastic way for the things, because not everything is decided, and we don't know. A pandemic came. We don't know what's coming next year. So this keeps still something of live issue. I don't know how it's in your countries, but sometimes we want the education is so well organized and planned that we've planned everything 1 year ahead. And then so many things happened, and I think it's a possibility through a pedagogy to have another kind of connection with your students and the community. And Paula has another question,
Yes,
I think.
Paula, yeah.
Hi there, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's not so much a question, but a statement really. This weekend I was at the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine conference. So all the pillars of lifestyle medicine, and overarching that, climate and sustainability. And there were some brilliant talks. Everyone's well aware of the connectedness. There was minimal allied health professionals presenting, lots of talk about the NHS 10-year plan, which is hinged on rehabilitation. And I think there's a huge door open for us to step in there. They need allied health professionals to talk at this conference. It's very medical bias, and they're putting a lot of research into it with some big names and professors talking about it. But physiotherapy is missing, although activity and movement is advocated by medics and their own business ventures and so on. And I really would love to connect you, maybe Filip, with them, because it seems like a big open door where we need to step into, from my perspective.
Thank you, Paula, because yesterday I just submitted an editorial to the Journal of the Spanish Association of Physiotherapy, talking particularly about that. I mean, it is not that we have to be invited. We are there, and we are. I mean, that's a natural. I mean, I'm so used for people to say, "What are you doing here?" And I just, well, I was not invited. I mean, that is so important, and it's so important that we are in these spaces. And when I don't know, urban planning and design is being discussed, we can be there. We should be there. The point is that. I feel that there is a lot of people involved in policy making and advocacy and so on, but sometimes it is a quite lonely process, and it's very easy to get burned with that. So I think you have to go in and then jump out a bit. Otherwise, it is like a lot of pressure because we're in the end, we're talking with a critical perspective, we want to change things. But for that, you need a community, and this community has to be in your back when people's doing things. But if you were there, I mean, you are also in a good position. It's nice that you talk about, I mean, Filip or me, but you are there, and you are the Environmental Physiotherapy Association, you are your organization. So I think you are embodying what we want to say.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I hear you, but I relate to your confidence issue about speaking up earlier.
Yeah. I think it's, funny, I see your hand, I'll give you the word right away. My thought on this is, physiotherapists don't have the physiotherapy profession doesn't have a very strong track record of reaching beyond its professional boundaries, right? Like, we very much sort of a profession that speaks to the inside quite a lot. Coincidentally, right? Like, because we don't have a good strong track record of interacting with the environment around us, if you will. In some ways, environmental physiotherapy is also an attempt to try and push us out, right? Like, but I agree with Berta, and you have my support here with Paula. Go and do the speaking, dive into that, and yeah, you have backing from a growing community. Funny.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's hard to take word after such an inspiring talk. So thank you to all of you and your comments. But I have a question actually that relates to all of your presentation probably, but it really started with the presentation of Steinnun. When you asked your physiotherapists what are the roles and actions that they can take into their practice, I noticed, but maybe I'm wrong, so please correct me, that they were very much, again, self-centered, like saying, I must reduce my paper or whatever, I must reduce, da-da-da. And I think that the lack of like a very broad systemic approach, like we can reduce the use of imaging, we can reduce the use of medics, the drugs and stuff like that. And it goes a little bit in the direction of Berta saying, we are very self-centered, and maybe we should really broaden, have a role in the whole health system, not just physiotherapy. But please, Steinnun, if you have more details on the results of your study, I would be very interested.
Yeah, thank you, Fanny. I think it's no, I don't have it. This was just like a statement question. So, but maybe like they had the open question No, the open questions, where can we kind of reduce the impact on the climate and so forth. And I totally agree with you, like just with the imaging. I mean, we should be able to say, we don't need this imaging, instead of having somebody to have a doctor send him or her to. So, but nobody mentioned that. So I think that relates a lot to this. We are kind of very narrow-minded, can I say that? We are very self-centric. And actually, I had my students the other day, and we were talking about like health promotion and older people, and we were touching up on just like the environment and the organization of urban areas. And I was having them in groups going through different statements to see where they could find a role for physios. And there was one girl, she was really like outgoing. I mean, this doesn't have anything to do with physiotherapy. So I kind of have to say, okay, why do you say that? Well, I see a point there. So I think, and of course, I think it's maybe normal that our students are kind of there, but I think many of us as grown-up physiotherapists are also here. So, but yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any?
I want to add to the discussion that you started now, Fanny. I think it's really important. Also want to add, in addition to maybe self-centered, that self-conscious or not so confident in the multi-professional role or whatever you can say, that we should be really there should be no question that we should be in every decision-making situation within a healthcare context, but we're not. And every time one profession makes a decision regarding the need of another profession, there is a risk of the competence not being acknowledged. So I think we need to be in every decision-making situation in our different healthcare settings to make sure that our competence is really used at the right where it's needed. We have an example of testing out physiotherapists at the what's it called, acute ICU, and which is not at all a regular routine, but they have done studies on it, and it shows that the patients come to the right, they get the right care faster, and they get home faster, and they get less medication, and they don't come in return as many times as so. We just need to be a lot more out of our comfort zones, I think.
I'll use that as a closing word, just for the sake of being sort of respectful of people's time. Thanks, Annie. Thank you for today's session, today's webinar, or kind of seminar or meeting or whatever. Really lovely discussion and lovely to hear those presentations. I'm always, I always really want to encourage people, this is a little bit of a presentation of some of the topics that, environmental physiotherapy touches on. I would argue that environmental physiotherapy is even broader than that, and I really want to always encourage people to explore far and wide in terms of topics and possibilities when we think in these kinds of directions. In this particular case, of course, there's an invitation to read the publications in the special issue that we published. You can find your way there through the interweb in many different ways, I'm sure. But yeah, explore and just to pick up sort of the conversation with Paula, get involved, get doing something, and feel free to draw on the support of the Environmental Physio Association and other units such as the one that Berta leads to help you, give you backing, give you a platform to speak, to explore, and so on. So thank you very much for today.